All right, welcome to the WTF Divorce podcast. Today, I'm excited to talk to Grace Casper. Grace is a 24-year-old author of the new book. I've got a copy here. It's called Dear Parents, Notes from a Child of Divorce. Grace, thanks for being on the show today.
Absolutely, Rob. I'm honored to be here. You guys have really powerful guests, so I can't believe I'm now one of them.
I'm excited to talk to like a different perspective. I know I was on your show and it's different to talk to dads, but we never hear from kids of divorce. So this is exciting, especially as a dad. I've got three kids, 11, 9, and about to be 6. And I only really see it from my eyes. I project as to what, they're thinking, but I really have no idea. So I'm excited to talk to you and kind of get into your story of when all this went down for you and what it felt like. So you want to start from the beginning, like when your parents got divorced, maybe even before and leading up to it, what you were thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my parents were married for 12 years, and while I was alive for that part of their marriage, when they were married, it was always like walking on eggshells. It just wasn't a super healthy marriage, and it was obvious. And Jack and I, that's my little brother, we had this thing called the honeycomb hideout in our house that my mom made for us. And it was like, this is going to sound really dramatic, but I promise it wasn't that bad. But it was a little closet that we had like junk food in and blankets and stuffies and a DVD player because we didn't have iPads back then. And Jack and I would go hide in the honeycomb hideout if mom and dad were fighting. So it was kind of, we were used to staying away when mom and dad were fighting. It just kind of was a part of our routine, and it seemed very normal. And then realizing what life was like post divorce, I had no idea what healthy looked like. So it was awesome when they got divorced.
Let me pause you for a second. How old were you when they got divorced,
Oh,
and what
yes.
was it like? How did they tell you? I'm curious about that from a kid's
Yeah.
perspective.
Great question. So I was 8 and Jack was 6. Um, that's when, so they told us when they separated. They didn't tell us when the divorce was like official. So they told us at the beginning of the separation process, which I thought was good. I thought it would be really weird if they separated and then waited to tell us till it was finalized. So I'm glad they told us when the separation began. But my mom actually sat us down when my dad already moved out, and we had no idea he already moved out. And she said, Dad doesn't live here anymore. He got an apartment in Denver, and we are separating and we're going through a divorce. And Jack said, Does that mean like you guys aren't married anymore? And she was like, Yeah, that's what that means. And I remember thinking to myself as an 8-year-old, like, wow, this is really sad and I need to be sad. But I didn't really get why it was sad because dad was gone for business trips anyways, and the house still felt so normal. And I just thought, like, he'll be back. And reality didn't hit until we went to dad's house for the first time. And it was like, oh, like we pack a bag and like we go to dad's house now. Like, what? So the reality of the divorce really set in when we started doing the back and forth thing. And then it was like, oh, okay, yeah, like dad's dating people. Mom took off her ring. Like, this is real.
Yeah, what was that like? As the dad, I moved out to an apartment as well. I don't. So your mom stayed in the house. What is
Yeah.
that like for a kid when you're going to the apartment? Without all your stuff. It's as a dad, I could say I'm not the best at furnishing and making the house super kid friendly. What does a kid think when they're walking to dad's apartment and see this is their new home half the time?
Yeah, I talk about it in my book, and I try to say it in a really kind way because now I understand as an adult all that my dad had to go through. But back then, like, it was scary because I went from the comfortability of like the suburbs in my home to then this random, we called it the glass tower in Denver, where like literally his apartment was all glass. So like the walls were glass, like everything was glass, and then because he had to move out so quickly, all he could get was a 1 bedroom apartment. So he had his room, and then Jack and I built a fort on the ground in the living area on the floor. And so we didn't have beds yet. Like, we didn't have our own space. Jack and I like shared the living room floor together. And it sounds like very like, oh, so sad. But honestly, like my dad made it fun by making it kind of like an adventure for us and being like, we're going to make a fort on the ground. And then we got to like have the TV in front of us and like, ooh, we get to watch TV as we fall asleep, which we never got to do before. And so like little privileges like that, and that made it kind of sound fun as a kid. But it definitely was intimidating. Like even just I talk about in the book like the sounds of sirens going off because we're in the city. Like I'm not used to that because I grew up in the suburbs. So then just hearing like the sounds of a city as you're falling asleep, like just the minor sensory changes even felt like a huge change to be a kid and be like, what is going on right now?
So what was that like when you went back to your mom's house? Was there a lot of talk about like what's going on at dad's, or was that kind of stuff you kind of kept to the other parent?
Yeah, I would say I wasn't really good at talking about it. And truthfully, like my parents going through the midst of all of the separation and trying to finalize the divorce, I don't remember them really being good at asking about it either. It was just kind of like, this is what we're doing and that's it. And there wasn't a whole lot of talk of like, how does this feel? Like, how are you guys adjusting? It was just like, here's what we're doing. And so it wasn't till years later that then we all finally started like looking back and reflecting and being like, wow, like that was hard and that was really interesting to manage. And I was really lucky to have my younger brother Jack because we really processed it together and we would really were the only ones who understood each other because he knew what it was like to go back and forth. So I always think divorce is a lot better if you have siblings with you. Because it was nice to lean on Jack and be like, don't you think that this is weird? And he's like, yeah. And then to think like, do you feel like you have to be a different person in front of dad than you do mom? And he's like, yeah. And so just the differences and I don't know, kind of managing these different personalities with both parents. And then, we got trapped in the trap that many kids of divorce fall into, which is like mom would say something about dad and then say, oh, don't tell your dad. And we'd be like, okay. And then dad would say something about mom and be like, don't tell your mom I said that. And we're like, okay. So then we're just storing all these secrets going back and forth. And it's like, oh, I can't say that. Oh my gosh, I don't want to bring that up. And there's just a lot of internal stress that goes on when you're a child of divorce that I think people don't really know about.
What's it like with friends? I mean, or I assume a lot of your friends their parents are still married. Are you going to their houses? Are you talking to them about it? Or is it something that you just keep private and or feel a little embarrassed about?
That's a great question. At first, I was embarrassed because I was actually one of the first in my grade to have divorced parents, and everyone else's were together, and it just felt like you don't get it. But then, unfortunately, as I got older, I did not become the minority. I was more the majority, and people started having divorced parents, and they were coming to me and being like, hey, I know you've been living with this since you were a third grader. What has that been like? And I ended up kind of like coaching other kids of divorce through it. And that was really nice to know that I could offer something. Because at the time, I'm just going through this and nothing's really, I don't know, coming out of it. So to know that there are people who could benefit from my advice from being through it before them was really, really cool. But I mean, I was lucky to have friends that were willing to talk about it with me. And like, I had a lot of friends that hosted me and Jack at their house when my mom had to go to mediation with my dad or had to do like different legal stuff with the divorce. She didn't want us to know that was going on. So she would just drop us off at this house and then be like, you guys have fun at your play date. And we had no idea what was going on behind our backs.
People listening to this and your audience are mostly parents, actually. I meant reading these books. Do you have any like kind of scripts or things you could tell parents to tell their kids when they're talking about their friends? Like, hey, if you go to school and your friends ask you why you're not going to this person's house, any tips on what kids can say to their friends?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's like an awesome script for that other than just saying like to really empower your kids to know that hey, their family dynamic looks different, but it's not broken. Just because it looks different doesn't mean it's worse or that it's bad or that it's broken. It just simply means that it's different. And different doesn't equate to being bad. And so just empowering your kids and their family dynamic and knowing that they still are from a healthy loving, caring family, and they can be proud of that. And they can be proud of their stories. So if, they're invited to a birthday party and it's dad's weekend or it's mom's weekend and they can't go, talking to their friends about that and saying, hey, my parents aren't together, as you may know, and I need to talk to my dad first to see if he'll let me go to your party. I hope you can understand, blah, blah, blah. I had to do that a couple of times as a kid. And I think honesty is always the best policy. Like, there's no way to saying, like, beating around the bush and pretending that you don't have divorced parents. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a different dynamic in the house. And I think a lot of kids will understand. And I really haven't seen many, like, kids bullying or making fun of me because my parents weren't together.
I like what you said. Empower your kids to be able to talk about it. Say it's not a big deal, even though it is sometimes. Also, just moving back and forth. I see that with my kids. It's like, can I play at this person's house? I don't have their mom's phone number, so there are these little like frictions that come up that you, while your married parents' life wasn't ideal, it just went a little probably smoother in general, and now you have all these new things to think about when you're dealing with two different houses, right?
I will say, like, while it provided emotional stability and like a healthier environment at each separate house, it did also provide more hoops to jump through and logistic hurdles to tackle, as far as things like that, like hanging out with friends or forgot this at mom's house. Dang it, I can't go get it because I live 40 minutes away. And, like, I don't know. There is a lot of other things that came with the divorce, but I would say, like, looking back as a young adult now, I am so grateful for it, because the alternative, like we talked about in my episode with you, is like, the alternative would have been them staying together. And yeah, maybe I wouldn't have the hurdle of, forgetting things at mom's house, but holy cow, I would not be the person I am today because I got to grow up in such healthy environments. And if they were still together, I would have witnessed so much crap and garbage and stuff that wasn't good for me to see. And my mom wouldn't be the whole confident human she is today. My dad wouldn't be the whole person he is today. And I'm so glad that I get to see them as their own people now and, like, their true selves, because the divorce gave them that. When they were together, they were trying to be things for each other that just, like, wasn't who they were, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what would you say to parents that are thinking of staying together for the kids? From a kid's perspective, now with some distance, what would you say to parents that have that mindset?
I'm one of the rare ones, and I like to say that please don't do that. Just because of the studying I've done, it's not just my perspective. It's also, I have a podcast where I interview other children of divorce. And I mean, divorce sucks at any age, but man, if your child's 8 years old and you want to separate with your person, but you're like, no, let's stay until they're 18. Oh my gosh, those next 10 years of their life are going to be so drama. And then y'all are going to break up. And then at 18 years old, they're going off to college and they're going, wait, my whole world's tearing apart. My parents are getting divorced now. Wait, did they wait to get divorced because of me? Oh no, now it's my fault. Oh no, were they ever in love? When did they fall out of love? Da, da, da. Like, you're just examining your whole life, and then you go like, what? Shut the front door. What is going on here? And so I think, like, the older that you are when they get divorced, actually the more complicated it gets, because you are, like, because you're older and you're more mature, you understand more and you want to know, like, did dad cheat on mom? Like, what happened here? And whereas when you're younger, it's just like, okay, stuff is changing, but I'm not really sure why. And then as you get older, it just becomes your normal. Like, I interviewed a guy who's 25 on my podcast. His parents just got divorced, and he's a 25-year-old, like a grown man. And oh my gosh, it's like tearing him apart. He does not know how to cope. He doesn't know what to do with it. He's dating someone right now really seriously, and now he's like, should I be dating right now? I don't understand love. Like, what is commitment? Because his role model of, like, what marriage is just crumbled. So it's very disorienting.
That's a great way to put it. It's so It's like mind blowing hearing it from a kid's perspective. And I like what you said too. It's people always say, "Oh, I wish I didn't get divorced, or it would have been so much easier for the kids." But I always say, like, compared to what? If you're comparing it to
Right.
some fantasy relationship, that's one thing that as it didn't exist, but the reality was you were in a really probably unhealthy relationship. So you have to compare it to that. And I think people like to
Right.
just come up with this other version of their lives that never existed anyways. And it sounds like,
Literally.
for kids also, you're living through it. We didn't live this, you guys should have stayed together. We're hiding in the fort because we can't be around you guys. So, it's important
Yep.
to like think about what reality actually looks like.
I also have friends, Rob, who are living like with parents that are still together. And they will say to me, "Oh my gosh, I know how terrible my parents' marriage is, and I just wish that they would get divorced. But because of shame or because of the things that come with divorce, they don't want to do that. But I just wish that they get divorced. I'd be fine with it. They would be more happy individuals, and I'd be a happier kid not dealing with all of their drama if they just ripped off the band-aid and got divorced." And so that's also coming from kids who are not kids of divorce, who like see the problems in their parents' marriage and are like, "What are y'all doing?"
Yeah, we're modeling this behavior for our kids, and I'd like to ask you about dating. You are what 24, so you are still young, but you are dating. You've had experience in relationships. What do you think? Can you wrap your head around like how dating would have been different if your parents stayed together that whole time and it was really unhealthy versus like you said, ripping the band-aid off and you seeing your parents in a different light and how you view what a healthy relationship looks like. That's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I could guess what my dating life would be like if my parents stayed together. Um, but I don't know. I will say, like, yeah, they got divorced when I was 8, and I got to see healthier lifestyles built around it because they were separated. But at the same time, I still felt the trauma and the effects of like their dynamic and also who they are. My mom and dad are just such different people. And so being with one and then being with the other, I just saw so much in life. And I think being around such different things and growing up in such different ways, I definitely was a little bit lost in high school and was really wanting attention from my dad. And out of that place, started dating people that like were not in my sphere of requirements for what I wanted somebody. And I think I just really wanted my dad to just like give a fuck. And I wanted him to be like, "Yeah, that guy's really wrong for you," and like rah rah, you know? But instead, he was very much, and I mean, this is his parenting style, and that's totally fine, and it has some pros to it, but he was very much like, "It's your life, you do what you want, blah, blah, blah." But I think I just wanted him to just be like, "Don't date that guy." And so there was a season where I was dating people that aren't good for me, and I knew it, but I kind of liked it because it made me feel like powerful and rebellious, and it made me feel like I'm in control because I know that you're bad for me and I could dump you any minute, but I'm out of your league and da da da. Like very manipulative and not love. Um, and then I didn't date people for probably about 2 years, and then I met my boyfriend now, John, out of the blue, and I totally felt like he was from God because he just is wonderful and he understands me really well. His parents are similar to my parents in the way that they act, and he gets the way I grew up, and um, he also like it's scary how well he knows me, and he can call me out if I'm being manipulative or something. And he's like, "Grace, you know you don't have to do that." Like I'll ask him, "Can you make dinner for me tonight? Because I've done it for you the past 5 times, and I've done this for you and this for you and this for you." And he's like, "Grace, you don't need to list all the things you've done for me to prove that I can make you dinner. Like you can just straight up ask, 'Can you make me dinner tonight?' Because we're in a relationship, and that's what you do. You give to each other in a relationship." And I'm like, "What? Like I don't think I'm worthy to ask you to do things for me." And he's like, "No, no, no. I want to do things for you because I love you. It's not this like tit for tat where like, oh, you did something for me, now it's my turn to do something for you. And I'm like, oh, weird. Like I always feel like I have to earn love. So he's been
Yeah.
very refreshing. It's been cool dating him.
I mean, you're so much wiser than I was at 24. What's one thing that you learned about your mom post divorce that you didn't know when they were together? And then we'll do your dad also.
Woo! Rob, I love this question. I've never gotten this before. I like this one a lot. For my mom, I learned that she is a loud, passionate, hilarious individual. And I think before the divorce, I didn't know she was like that. When they were married, she was meek and quiet and submissive and very like go with the flow. And now she's like in a movie theater and she's like the loudest one cracking up. She's like really expressive with the way she talks and really passionate about like her hobbies, and she goes all in, and she's just like a badass. Like she gets shit done. And because she's also had to step into the role of father in our house. So she's like, you know, if something breaks in the house, we don't have a handyman anymore. Like she's the handyman. So she'd look up stuff on YouTube and figure it out. Like she'd do a lot before calling the neighbor guy and being like, hey, Len, can you come over and help me? It was kind of like this pride thing in her where she was like, I don't need a man. But yeah, so that side of her came out, which I never thought was there. So that was surprising. And then for my dad, I saw like a really, it's weird. She became like louder, you know, and then he almost became like quieter in a sense, where he became more compassionate and more, how do I describe it? More like squishy, more like comfy. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, I think when he was in the house and they were together, he was this authoritative figure and kind of like scary and intimidating and like the head of the house. And then when they got divorced, he had to be more of a mom then to me and Jack when we were at his house. So he became more nurturing and more creative in the way that he hung out with us, because he's like, well, crap, Jill isn't here to plan the activities for the kids. Now I have to do that. Jill isn't here to cook for the kids. I have to do that. So he just learned how to become more nurturing as the years went on. Because I would say that when the divorce first started, he was a little bit awkward about it. And I think he didn't really know how to parent us. He was like, Jill's not here. I don't know what to do. And then as the years went on, I saw him kind of forming into this really confident father who was like, here's the ways I can show up for my kids. And yeah, I can't make their favorite meal like their mom can, but man, I can do this for them and I can do that for them. And there's this activity I put in my book for parents to fill out, this little T-chart to be confident in what you can offer your kids, because you're not going to be just like your spouse. And that's a good thing, because you can't offer what they can offer your kids, but you have your own set of qualities and experiences that you can offer your kids that is unique to you. And it's going to serve your kids in a way that they will not get from the other parent. So just be confident in what you can give your kids. But yeah, that's how I saw them step up in different ways.
Okay, along those lines, I'm terrified of I have 11-year-old boy, 9-year-old boy, about to be 6-year-old girl. Tips for a father of a teen and preteen daughter. It sounds absolutely terrifying. Give us some inside info.
Oh boy, I'll tell you an embarrassing story I've never told anyone. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's really awkward being a teen, and like oh my gosh, I turned into kind of like a bitch when I hit hormones. I was so mean and everything was buggy and everything like just, I was like, get away from me. And my dad was super good at giving me my space. I talk in the book about how there's seasons of favoritism with parents, and like I really leaned on my mom when I was younger, but then when I was a teenager, I really gravitated towards my dad because he was able to give me that space that I craved and like believed in my independence and was, I don't know, not as like hovering over me as my mom was. And so I liked that he gave me space. I liked that he empowered me. But then also the embarrassing story is one time I was new to getting my period and I got it at his house and I did not know what to do because I was like, well, shit, like my mom's not here. I don't have anything. Like, I was so scared. And so I went up to him and I was like, Dad, I have to go to the store. And he was like, okay, like, why do we need to go to the store? And I was like, wait, I have a thing I need to get. And I think, like, it took him a little minute. And then he was like, oh, shit. And then he's like, oh, yeah, no, okay, yeah. And so then we, like, went to the store and I, like, got stuff. And then he was like, he was so nice about it. He's like, Grace, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. He's like, you're a woman. This is what women have to deal with. He's like, I'm sorry you have to deal with this. That is atrocious. Like, he was being overly kind about it. And I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. I was so young and like, oh my gosh, it was so cringy. But it's a part of the thing. Like, there's times where you're going to have to buy that for your girls.
Yeah, so
But
so it shouldn't all rely on go ask mom. It's like dad's going to be dealing with this stuff. So
yes.
get ready to get uncomfortable
Yes.
and talk about it. All the changeovers, transitions when you're a kid, we have like a dad bag at our house. It's annoying for me. I imagine it's annoying for the kids. What is the most annoying part of switching back and forth between houses?
I hate to say this, but the night before transitioning was always my most anxious night for me. I think it was just like the mental anticipation of like, okay, going to dad's house, or like, okay, I'm going back to mom's house. And um, I don't know if this is every kid of divorce, but again, because my parents were so different, I felt like I had to show different parts of myself in front of them. They never asked me to do this. This is not their fault at all. It was just this subconscious thing that I assumed the role of, that now I know I never had to do, but I thought it was expected of me. And so I think for me, it was just the mental work of figuring out, like, okay, I'm going to dad, so I need to be this person. I can't talk about this. Mom told me this about dad. I can't tell that about dad. And then, okay, I got to bring this to dad's, and then he wants me to be there. And like just all of the things to keep track of in your head. And then to go to mom's and then revert back. Okay, now I'm back at home. I got school stuff to work on, da 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 da. And just, I don't know, there was a lot of mental work. So it was less the like physical packing and transitioning location. It was more like the mental work of who I had to be at dad's versus who I had to be at mom's.
Anything you could tell a parent if you were a parent of divorce and you had kids? So
Oh my
parents are listening to this. Maybe a tip for a parent to help with that transition time.
Yes, I just wish that my parents, and they don't know this, I never communicated this, so again, no shame on them, but I just wish that they would have sat me down individually and said, hey, do you know that I want you to be all of you at this house? Like, just because I only get you for, let's say that they only got me for 48 hours that time around. Just because I get you for 48 hours doesn't mean I want the really happy, joyful Grace who's like always excited to do stuff. Like, if I just get you for 48 hours and you are sad the entire time, you're in a bad mood the entire time, man, I will love that time because I get to be with you. I want to be with you and all that you are. And because you're a human, you contain different emotions. You have bad days. You have things that affect your mood, just like I'm affected sometimes during our time. And so if we can just both promise to each other that we can come to each other as our most authentic selves, I think we're going to have the best time whenever you're at this house or whenever you're at dad's house or whatever it may be. And so for each parent to both explicitly give direct permission to the child that like, hey, you know, you can be your full self, right? I hope you're, and don't assume that they are, but just like asking, like, I hope you're not like reserving parts of yourself here. Like, I hope you know that, I mean, you can be mad at me, like, you can be frustrated at divorce, like, that's allowed here. And just giving them that permission of, like, I want all of you, and you don't need to manage the divorce or manage my emotions because you're just a kid, you know?
It's such a great tip is to let your kids have their emotions, but I never even thought about explicitly telling them that, almost encouraging them to do that. So one thing we see a lot of are these Disney dads. You know, we can all be guilty of it, is where we want to like the best for our kids all the time. So we want to take them here and take them there and like maximize their
Oh,
experience when they're with us and keep them busy and do these things for our own egos in some ways. Whereas I always hear kids really just want time with you. What does a kid think like when they're at the other parent's house about what do they really want from their parents?
I love this question because my dad made, I mean, we've had a lavish childhood because of him. Like, he's brought us on these crazy vacations and stuff. And I'm really grateful for them. But man, I would have appreciated them a lot more as a 24-year-old versus like a 10-year-old who didn't know the history of the city and things like that. So I think like there's a point where it's like, they're kids, they're not going to realize stuff like that. Like, for example, I literally just brought my niece to Disneyland and she's 4 years old and she didn't want to do any of the rides. She literally just wanted to look at stuff in her stroller. She was just like, oh, that's so pretty. Oh, that's so pretty. Like, and it's like, wow, we spent so much money just to like take a walk. And so I think recognizing what they can handle at their age is really important. And I have a story to back this up with my brother. I remember my dad brought us to this really nice dinner, like insane food with really wild flavors and like really like a amazing dinner. And we got home and Jack was in my room and he was like crying and he was like, I just wish we could go to Subway sometimes. And I was like, it's okay, Jack. But I think my dad, he just wanted to show us love so bad. And he wanted to like prove that he's a really like fun, experiential dad. And he didn't realize that, man, we just wanted Subway sometimes, and just like sit in the kitchen and eat our Subway sandwiches and watch TV. So, yeah, I think there's no need to overthink it and make it these huge, like, wow, experiences, especially when the kid isn't old enough to appreciate it. Like, don't spend all this money on something that your kid's going to look back on and be like, yeah, I loved the pool at the hotel. And you're going to be like, what? We saw like this art museum and this cool architecture and blah, blah, blah. And they don't care about that. They just care about the pool at the hotel. So just remembering that they're kids and they don't need a lot. They just want present people in their lives and like fun activities. But it doesn't need to be these like, whoo, like huge, all stops are poured out for this thing.
Yeah, I guarantee you, if I take a trip with my kid, usually, and I ask later on, what was your favorite part? It's like the hotel room, the fact that
Yeah,
there was a TV in the room, going to like McDonald's and the
yeah,
pool.
I
And
know.
you're like, and you spent thousands of dollars. And I'm thinking, like, why don't we just go to the Holiday Inn down the street for, $100 and you can have the best
Literally.
weekend ever?
No,
I think
literally.
I think as a parent, and this is something usually one parent might be better financially off, and there's like, and maybe they're doing more things. The other parent feels inadequate. I'm not doing these cool trips with my kids, but you're saying
That
you
was
don't
my
need
mom.
to.
Yeah, I remember. So my dad again takes us on these. I mean, we got to go to New York, like see shows on Broadway, like really cool stuff that I still remember and love. And I mean, I love New York because I got to experience it with my dad. But at the same time, one of my favorite vacations as well is going to my cousin's lake house with my mom, which was like a not expensive trip, and we literally just chill on the lake the whole weekend. And I would equate that to the same level of love as this expensive New York trip where we see a bunch of shows and eat fancy food. So, I mean, for me, it's about like memories and the people that I'm with, and how much fun I'm having. And it's not so much about like, I don't know, Instagrammable, postable moments. Because when you're a kid, you just don't really give a shit about that. There's not so much as the competition I see in adults now, where it's like people posting about their vacations or where they've been. And now that I'm older, there's more of that coming into my life, where my friends will be like, "Yeah, I'm going to Turks and Caicos," and it's like, "Oh, well, that's a big deal." Whereas when you're a kid, like you don't care where you're going. So yeah, I mean, the competition's real. I remember there was times where Jack and I felt like we couldn't tell our mom how much fun we had with dad because it would hurt her feelings. Because she'd be like, well, sorry that I can't take you guys to New York and blah, blah, blah. Or because we're from Colorado, like my dad would bring us skiing, and skiing's a really expensive sport. My mom couldn't bring us skiing, and she'd always be like, sorry, I can't bring you skiing. And we're like, no, mom, like, we know you can't bring us skiing, and we're not upset with that because we get to do that with dad. Like, there's stuff that you can do that dad can't do, and there's stuff dad can do that you can't do, and it's okay?
You wrote this book. Let's show it here. Dear Parents, Notes from a Child of Divorce. Tell us when you wrote this, what got you to write it. I mean, it's pretty amazing, just the story behind it and how it can help parents.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah. I wrote it on the monkey bars at recess on my composition notebook in 5th grade. So that's where the first words came from it. The majority of the book now is not from 5th grade me, but it's actually from 22, 23, 24-year-old me over these last 3 years. And it's 16 chapters, me writing to the parents, telling them about what I feel like tools parents need to parent their kids well through divorce. And then at the back of the book, there's the appendix, which has a picture of 5th grade me. And it's my original 5th grade tips that I wrote to kids when I was writing it to my brother for going back and forth from mom and dad's house. So, I mean, it's a 14-year-old dream that has totally come to life finally and has become this tangible book. And really, I'm not trying to like toot my own horn here, but there really is nothing like it on the market for parents to have a resource in parenting through divorce from the child's perspective. And I also try to be careful and stay in my own lane with saying like, hey, I've never been a parent before. I've never been divorced, and I admit that fully. And so take what I say, you know, with as much power as you'd like. But what I can offer you is the child's perspective and is the interviews that I've had on my podcast and hearing from other children of divorce. And so I hope that these guardrails that I give parents are just a way to inspire them to start dreaming about, okay, how can I make my child's childhood like memorable and hopefully hopeful post-divorce rather than traumatic and something that shakes them.
I love that it's like it's this perspective of a child, but you're also now have all this knowledge. So you do have this like perfect blend of like, I see what you're going through. Here's what I went through. Here's what I know now. Because let me tell you, Grace, like every day, I mean, look, this show is called WTF Divorce. That's literally what is going through my head. You know, when I wake up with my daughter and I have to get her dressed, it's like we do not know what we're doing. So
Yeah.
it's like really refreshing to know that you know, nobody knows what they're doing, and like this is an opportunity to learn from it and not be perfect. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to share the book and dig into it.
Thank you. I'm so excited to hear more of your thoughts once you work through it all, because there are questions in it. If y'all didn't know, there's 3 questions after each chapter for you to answer as the parent yourself and reflect on what we've talked about, and hopefully you can gain experience and put in your own story into the chapter to really see how it can affect your own life.
Is it a book you work through with your kids at all, or it's kind of just like homework to go take with you and apply?
It's mainly homework. There are some action plans after each chapter that include doing something with your child. So I wouldn't say the whole book is about doing it with your child, but all of it is with the child in mind, if that makes sense. I
Okay.
just want to say thank you guys for listening to a child of divorce who's never been married and never been divorced. So thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Tell people where they can find you and where they can find your book.
Absolutely. So you can find my book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Target. You can also buy it from me directly on my website at divorcetipsfromkids.com. If you click on book there, you can buy it there. Free shipping, just not as fast as Amazon. So if you want it quick, I would recommend Amazon. And then you can follow me on Instagram at divorcetipsfromkids. I also have a monthly newsletter that I send out. If you want to sign up for that, you can type in your email. And then I also have a podcast that I host called Divorce, What I Wish My Parents Knew, where I interview children of divorce. We talk about what their parents did well and what they could have done better. And I also interview other resources in the divorce realm, so you can hear from other people like Rob who exist and know about other things to give you resources as you go through divorce.
So cool what you're doing. You're like paving completely something that has never been done before. So it's really exciting, and I'm glad to be along for the ride and learn from you as my kids grow up too.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate your humility and just your willingness to believe in me. So thank you.
Thanks, Grace.